What do Paul Evans, a man who claims he lived an entire lifetime while his body lay in a coma, and Roy, a life well lived, a fictional virtual reality game featured in Rick and Morty, have in common? In both cases, decades of life, work, daily routines, and the tiniest details of everyday life unfolded in what felt like mere moments, only to find out none of it was real. In the show Rick and Morty, Morty spends an entire life in a virtual world before returning to reality, memories intact. How do you live years inside a dream and wake up to only find days, maybe months, or even just hours have passed? And how do we know what's real anymore? Let's go deeper. Paul Evans wasn't just dreaming, he was living. Back when this happened, pancreatitis hit him hard. Doctors put him under a deep coma for just under 4 months. No way out. Body locked down. Brain wide awake. And suddenly, he's in Singapore. It wasn't like some hazy dream. It felt solid, like he had actually stepped into another life. He remembers getting into his car. His license plate number is clear as day. He vividly remembers the clothes he wore and how everything felt. He also recalls working at a job where he managed a sales team that sold virtual reality games. These games would allow customers to live lives of other people like celebrities. Customers would purchase the games, plug into headsets and pods, and wake up immersed in the lives they had chosen. This got me thinking about reality, my life. Is my experience just someone else's dream? But then the software glitched and locked up. They were testing a new version and it malfunctioned, trapping him inside. He was in a black room that he described as being a plastic membrane for what felt like 6 months. Programmers talked to him at first, promising fixes, but then just started chatting about sports and the news. He finally realized that he had to break out himself. He picked at the membrane until he felt his fingers slip through. Then finally, he opened it enough that he could push his head through. And the second his head pushed through, that's when he woke up from his coma, eyes coming open in the hospital bed. And get this, in his coma, life dream, his dad died there. He buried him, wept real tears, all while his actual dad sat by the bed watching him cry in his coma. When Paul finally opened his eyes, he stared at his father like a ghost, thinking, "You shouldn't be here." He had to mourn the death that never happened, had to convince himself the whole thing wasn't real. He was in a medically induced coma for just under 4 months, yet inside his dream, it felt like 2 full years.
And that brings us to the Rick and Morty episode. Here Morty enters the arcade game, Roy a life well lived, with Rick placing the helmet on his head. The simulation begins and suddenly Morty is Roy. He starts as a child experiencing nightmares. The nightmare eerily mirrors the moment Rick put the helmet on him. Then Roy moves through life just like any normal person. School, thinking about his future, learning lessons growing up. He becomes a football star. Later he settles into a mundane life at a carpet store. He even experiences serious health problems. Cancer strikes him, he recovers, and life continues. Every moment, every routine, every mundane detail unfolds. And then Roy dies. He slips and falls off a ladder and his life ends. The game ends, showing 55 years as his final score. Morty removes the helmet, coming back to reality, disoriented, with all those decades compressed into minutes. Sound familiar? Just like Paul Evans, Morty lived an entire lifetime in what was essentially a fraction of real-world time. Every vivid detail, every emotional high and low, every moment that felt permanent, gone in an instant, yet imprinted on the mind forever. That overlap is what makes it so disturbing, because if the mind can squeeze decades of real feeling life into minutes, then what actually separates the real world from a dream, a simulation, or a coma? Here's where things get even stranger. Most assume these experiences are the brain inventing entire worlds, elaborate hallucinations while the body lies unconscious. But why do people report structured memories? Why do they remember entire cities, workplaces, routines, conversations, and even details they've never seen before? It raises an unsettling possibility. What if the mind isn't always creating these experiences from scratch? What if it's tuning into something that already exists? And if that sounds strange, what comes next is even stranger. And now that brings us to our theory. If the mind can somehow tune into experiences that already exist, lives that feel as real as our own, then what happens next is far more bizarre and far more unsettling than we normally imagine. It's not just a dream, it's not just a hallucination, it's a possibility that consciousness can step outside itself, brushing against or even temporarily inhabiting another person's lived experience. We'll call this idea the stranger memory theory. What if some of your memories don't actually belong to you? Because here's something unsettling about human memory. Your brain doesn't store the past like a recording. It doesn't keep perfect footage of what happened. Every time you remember something, your brain actually rebuilds the memory from fragments, sensations, emotions, pieces of information. It's less like pressing play and more like reconstructing a story, which means something strange becomes possible. If the brain can reconstruct memories, then in theory, it could also reconstruct memories that never originated in your life at all. Entire experiences, entire years, maybe even an entire lifetime. Think about Paul for a moment. 2 full years of memories, a job, a city, daily routines, co-workers, a company selling virtual reality lives, even the grief of losing his father. All of it felt real enough that when he woke up in the hospital and saw his father alive beside the bed, his mind struggled to reconcile the two realities. Because in the life that he remembered, his father had already died. However, this is where our theory, the stranger memory theory, comes into play. What if Paul wasn't remembering his own life? What if he was remembering a stranger's life? A lot of people assume consciousness is something produced by the brain, sealed inside the skull like a private universe. But there's another possibility. What if consciousness is more like a receiver, and the brain is simply the device tuned to a particular signal? Normally your brain is locked onto one stream of experience, your life, your memories, your identity. But under unusual conditions, dreams, coma states, neurological shutdowns, that signal might drift, just slightly, long enough to pick up something else, another signal, another mind, another life, the life of a stranger. And if reality is as vast as modern physics suggests, with branching timelines, parallel worlds, and endless variations of existence, there could be another person living a life similar to Paul's coma dream world. They might work in Singapore, run a virtual reality company, lose their father, and experience life's details. Maybe Paul's mind briefly tuned into this stranger's life while in a coma for 4 months, like a radio tuning into another frequency. It didn't feel like just a dream. It was lived experiences of a stranger in the multiverse. And if something like that is even remotely possible, it raises some deeply unsettling questions. How often could this happen? Could dreams sometimes be fragments of a stranger's memories bleeding through? Could deja vu be the moment when 2 lives, yours and a stranger's, briefly overlap? Could the strange feeling that you've lived through something before actually be an echo of something that happened to someone else? A stranger in another world? Because your entire sense of identity is built from memories. They're the evidence your brain uses to convince you that your life has been unfolding continuously from the past to this moment. But under the stranger memory theory, memories might not actually prove where you've been. They might only prove what your mind currently believes. Think about it. When Morty puts on the helmet, he enters Roy's life as a young boy. When Paul Evans arrived in Singapore, he was already an adult managing a team. The most unsettling part, the weirdest part for me, is that the moment they entered, they already had a full backstory. They remembered years of a life they hadn't actually lived in real time. They stepped into a stream mid-flow, yet their minds immediately accepted the history as their own. So what is the possibility that you just entered the life you're living happening right now. That every childhood memory and past triumph is just a beautifully crafted backstory for a traveler who just arrived. You feel like you've been here for decades, but you might have only just plugged in. You could have just woken up into a story that was already halfway finished. Thank you guys for watching. We greatly appreciate you. This was a fun theory to explore. If you'd like more content like this, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us out. And give us any suggestions of any other theories we should dive into or any other kind of mind-bending ideas. Let us know in the comments. And yeah, peace.